What's up, guys? Knight here. Today I have another review, Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles. It's here. It's been a little less than a month since its release, and I finally finished my first ever playthrough of the game. I did practically all the game has to offer, getting the side characters, doing some errands, and unlocking all the jobs, so I'm now fully ready to give my opinion on one of the last remaining FF games I have yet to play. Before I get into the pros and cons, I want to say that I played on the new remastered mode with full voice acting, updated graphics, and more. There's an option at the start of the game to play either version, one being with all the new changes, or the original version from 1997. That was already something I was kind of shocked when I opened the game, since I can't really recall the last time I played a remake, remaster, and they had the original game offered as an option as well. Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles follows the story of Ramza Beowulf as he tries to navigate the war between opposing parties. The story is heavily political through and through, and that's what the game kind of tells you, and then that's what you get. And now that's not a bad thing, and I will touch on my gripes I had with the story, not going into spoilers, but a lot of new features like the voice acting, cutscene viewer, and story summary sections, if you can call it that, really helped me fully grasp every single thing going on in Ivalice. I would be really scared to play the original from 97 without any of these features, so hats off to those who did, because there are a lot of names, a lot of kingdoms, a lot of people, and there's a lot of stuff being thrown at you in the first couple hours. And now that's not a bad thing, because that's cool world building, but to get into the good stuff before the actual bad stuff, I gotta talk about the voice acting first, because that is the thing that I probably love the absolute most. The voice work is exceptional. Everything in the game is voiced. It has a massively talented cast of VAs that varies greatly with every character, their respective regions and kingdoms. There's so many moments and cutscenes in the game that make characters like Ramza, Delita, Agrias, and more feel as alive as other fully 3D animated games. And the reason I bring that up is because this game is originally from the PS1. So being able to make these characters feel so fleshed out with less animation resources shows how much work CS3 put into this remaster with the voice acting. And on top of that, obviously that isn't the only thing that brings the game to life. The upgraded visuals are vibrant and full of color, with a beautifully updated UI, sound effects, and quality of life features to remove some old JRPG tedium like grinding. For example, there is a speed up function that a lot of the recent Square Enix remasters for like FF games have, so you can turn up the speed and get through fights a bit quicker. There's optional random encounters, which I don't think was in the original. You have to pick yes or no in this, which is really cool. And there are newly added difficulty options, which is a massive game changer for someone who sometimes only wants the story. There are 3 of those settings: Squire, Knight, and Tactician. Knight is like the normal mode that is from the original game, and Squire is more for story players, while Tactician is kind of for psychos who really want to get challenged, probably something you do on your second playthrough only, or if you did play the original and you were really good at it, then you want to do that too. But Tactician seems incredibly difficult, so I never gave it a shot myself. However, the combat is so in-depth that you will most likely enjoy a lot of the extra fights and challenge, so Knight is probably the way to go for most people. As someone who had zero idea what FF Tactics had in store for me combat-wise, or just anything in general for the game, I was a bit overwhelmed. There are loads of jobs, different abilities, and stats to get a grasp of originally, but the game slowly introduces these things to you. The game could definitely have explained a couple more things, I believe, but I luckily had my Twitch chat and some YouTube videos to explain the hidden stats and like best job combinations here and there. And I think another big reason as to why I'm happy I had those things with me, or I'd recommend people who have never played the game before to like look that up, is because as you're playing through the game, you have jobs for your characters and you want to level them up, but if you're doing mainly only the story, which is what I was doing, and you want to switch to a different job, you're going to then change weapons on a character that maybe you have leveled up on that specific job, so then you're going to go to maybe like a dagger or a sword that is way low hitting damage-wise, and then you kind of get screwed and you kind of are forced to grind a bit, which is fine, like I said. But I wanted to experiment a bit more and be able to level 2 jobs at once on one character, because I felt like it was kind of hard to change the job, like with Ramza, for example, and then be forced to grind levels with that low-level gear before moving on with the story. And I understand that's more of like a personal gripe, and that's just how the game is. You're supposed to experiment, do random encounters, try stuff, but sometimes I, still wanted to experiment while progressing the game forward. But either way, I am like a tactics newbie, so I'm not great at them at all, and I don't play many of them. So if you're someone who does love tactics games, then this is definitely something that will be right up your alley just for the job system alone. Like, there's a lot of great about this game, but the job system alone is absolutely phenomenal, even if I don't have many other points of reference. And still, if the story and visuals interest you, but the combat seems a bit scary, then don't let that intimidate you, because there is, like I said, the difficulty settings. Squire is relatively easy, and it is a breeze to get through. There are also so many Easter eggs from like the original Final Fantasy games. So there are errands in the game, and basically you send your units to do stuff. I think a lot of other tactical games has this thing, or even gacha games where you'll send like 2 or 3 units and they'll go, and while they're away you can't use them, but this helps them level up your jobs without doing a battle. And you have a chance of getting some artifacts or like locations discovered when you do these side quests, and now you can't go to these locations or use these artifacts. These are pretty much just items from like Final Fantasy 1 through 7 or something that hints towards one of those games with like character names or locations. And I thought that was really interesting because it's like, oh my god, look, it's the Chocobo Forest, or oh my god, look, it's Pandemonium, or, you know, other characters I don't want to spoil. But I thought it was dope. And there's also a timeline feature that is in FF16. It shows the past and present of Ivalice, and it's like a war map that has like the events of what's going on with arrows and names of kingdoms and little sprites of the characters, and you can kind of see as it happened, or as you're playing through the game, it will be updated so that you have like a much bigger picture to understand everything, since, like I said in the beginning, there are so many different names and titles and areas that you will definitely kind of get confused if you have not been through the game before, or if you're not like writing down things. And along with all that, the music is great. It is a Final Fantasy game, so I hope it would be good. There aren't really that many tracks that are huge standouts like a lot of the mainline Final Fantasies, but the music does complement the rest of the game very well. And so there's a lot to love about the game. As someone who has experienced it for the first time, I thoroughly enjoyed it, but there's definitely a couple things here and there that I'm not super fond of. I guess the first thing that's grown on me up until this point of making the review is the smoothed out sprites and textures. So I usually don't like when games have a remaster and they'll smooth out the sprites. Square Enix has done this in the past with some of their games, or even other companies, they've done this, and it just doesn't really look super great. Even in the first announcement trailer for FF Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, they showed the upgraded sprites, and I was a bit on the fence about it. However, after getting a couple hours with the game and, you know, finishing the game and all this stuff and experiencing everything together with the music and the sound effects and just, you know, the full package, I could not get over how beautiful the game looks. I honestly kind of prefer this style over the original look of the game, which is kind of crazy to say because probably people don't really agree with me there. However, I could not get over how lovely the colors were and how vibrant everything was, and how good the 3D landscapes looked. Like, this style of the game is way more visually appealing to me than something like the HD 2D styles like Octopath Traveler that Square Enix has been putting out recently. And that's not to say those games aren't absolutely beautiful, but I think the super heavy rendering that goes on in those kind of takes away from a bit of the classic look that they're going for. So this game has a absolutely perfect balance of that original 1997 PS1 look from the game and then the new upgraded style. And I know I brought it up with cons, and I guess I kind of like decided that I enjoyed it in the end, but it can still be looked at as an issue because you can only play the new upgraded version of the game with all the voice acting and all the new bells and whistles with the new style. So it would have been kind of nice to have like an original look of the game with the new stuff, and you could switch it on and off. However, I assume it was probably too much of a hassle for the devs. So the story, I haven't really talked about it much other than that it is political, and I'm not a huge fan of political stories, and that's not because I don't like the politics behind it. Usually it's just because I prefer more sci-fi, and political stories are kind of boring for me. And now I might have lost you at this point, but just hold on for a second. By boring, I mainly mean what is happening and what is set out in the beginning is what happens. In a lot of games, I like there to be a twist in the middle or at the end, or something that comes in when you're not expecting it to change it up and shake up what's happening. And in Tactics, there isn't necessarily a moment like that, other than there's like 1 or 2 moments I can think of, but there really isn't any large, like, scale, grandiose moment that stands out to me like other Final Fantasy games. And like I said, from the beginning to the end of what it's trying to do and what the characters are trying to do, specifically Ramza, and it kind of plays out like that. And I don't want to spoil anything, of course, but I felt like it was kind of rushed at the end. It seemed like it was building up to something that was going to hit a climax and be like, oh my god, like, this is crazy, blah, 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 blah. And it didn't really do that. Like, it hit a cool point at the end, for sure, but it wasn't anything even remotely to what I was expecting. And maybe my brain's been fried from Final Fantasy 7s, the Final Fantasy 10s, the FF14s of, the Final Fantasy world. So that could also entirely be it. However, I don't know, that was a gripe that I had, and it felt like there could have been a bit more or something that I just wasn't getting, but I definitely can't say that I wasn't a tad bit caught off guard when the credits rolled at the end. However, just one more thing, the game still left a major mark on me, and that's not to say, like I said, that the ending is bad. It wasn't for what I was hoping. But I will definitely tell you that it's still a crazy ending. Like what happens or the outcome, and especially the post-credit scene. It was awesome. I don't want to say anything else, but I was freaking out. And I was like, oh my god, okay, you know what? It definitely redeemed what I thought the climax of the game would be, which is crazy because people in chat were like, wait for the post-credit scene. And I was like, there's no way it's going to like make it that much better. But I think it truly did, which is pretty crazy. But either way, the characters are absolutely lovely. This is a character-focused game. These characters going through these political events throughout Ivalice and all this war and all this betrayal and all this stuff. And just such interesting characters, from the voice acting to the character design to the philosophies that each individual person in the world has. That being said, Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles is easily one of the most impressive remasters out of Square Enix, and in general from the recent years, to be honest. The newly added quality of life features, voice acting, and very topical political story make this otherwise 28-year-old game, which is kind of crazy, feel as though it just released for the first time in the big year 2025. And as a huge Final Fantasy fan, even with my issues, like I said, I still loved it. I can easily see why this is hailed as one of Square Enix's best from their golden age, and I'm glad I could experience it for the first time with the new updates. Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles gets a B+ from me. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next review. Peace.